I never thought I'd take my own brother to court. I never imagined I'd fight him over our dying mother's will. But he forced my hand when he stole everything she wanted me to have, and laughed in my face about it. This is the story of how I stopped being the quiet daughter and taught my brother that betrayal comes with a price. I want you to understand something about my family before I tell you what I did. Before you decide if I'm the villain or the hero. Because this didn't start with betrayal over money. It started when I was born. My parents had 2 kids. My brother Daniel was older by 2 years. My mom used to say he was her little prince. It wasn't a joke. She meant it. He could do anything, break windows, lie, steal money from her purse, and she'd laugh it off. I would so much as roll my eyes and get grounded for a week. My dad wasn't cruel, but he didn't stop it. He'd just work the farm and say, "That's your mother's way." We grew up in a farmhouse on 40 acres in Circleville, Ohio. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. My dad always said it would stay in the family forever. I believed that. When I was about 20, Dad got sick. Cancer. It was fast. He was gone before we had time to prepare. At the funeral, Daniel got drunk in the barn. Mom cried in my arms. Afterward, Daniel moved back home to help her. That's what he told everyone. But really he just moved his drinking buddies in and turned the place into a trash heap. I was 2 states away, trying to pay for college with loans and 2 jobs. Every time I called, my mom sounded tired. I'd ask if she needed me to come home, and she'd say Daniel was handling everything. That hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. When I graduated, I offered to move back. She said no. She said I should live my own life because Daniel was there for her. Even back then I knew what that meant. She didn't want me there because I'd see the truth. Daniel wasn't taking care of her. He was using her. Years went by. I visited when I could. But Daniel always seemed to be in the way, making snide comments, telling me not to stress Mom out. Then she got sick. Lung issues. Bad ones. I called her constantly, begged her to let me come home and help. She said no. Said Daniel was all she needed. I remember one call so clearly it makes my chest tighten. She sounded so weak. She couldn't even finish her sentence without coughing. I hung up and cried on the floor of my crappy apartment. Daniel wouldn't answer my calls. Or if he did, he'd say she was sleeping and hang up on me. I felt helpless. When she died, I got the call from a neighbor, not from my brother. He didn't even bother. I dropped everything. Drove home with tears running down my face. When I walked into the funeral home, he was there, leaning against the wall in a new leather jacket, laughing with his friend. He didn't even look sad. We buried her in the family plot next to Dad. I tried to talk to him about arrangements. About the house. The farm. What she'd want. He blew me off. Said he had it under control. I didn't push too hard that day. I was grieving. But something felt wrong. Off. I stayed a few days at my Aunt Linda's house. She was the only one who seemed to care how I felt. She made me tea and let me cry in her kitchen. I asked her if she knew anything about Mom's will. She shook her head but said she'd heard Daniel talking big at the bar, bragging that the farm's all mine now. My heart sank. But I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think he was drunk and stupid. I decided to see for myself. I called Mom's lawyer. Asked to see the will. He sounded uncomfortable. But he agreed to meet. When I walked into his office and sat down, he slid a folder across the desk. "Your mother changed her will 6 months before she passed," he said. I opened it with shaking hands. It left everything, to Daniel. Not split. Not even a mention of me. Just his name. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't favoritism. This was theft. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I don't even remember standing up from that chair. I just remember the blood rushing in my ears, my fingers going numb around that will. The lawyer, Chuck Miller, looked almost guilty. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked him, voice shaking, did my mother even know what she was signing? He hesitated. Then he said something I'll never forget. She was not well. But she was insistent. Not well. Insistent. Bullshit. I could picture it. Daniel hovering over her bed, telling her what to say. Her doped up on morphine, so sick she could barely breathe. Signing whatever they put in front of her because she didn't know any better. I wanted to scream. Instead I forced myself to stay calm. Asked for a copy. He gave it to me reluctantly. I thanked him, trying not to cry. When I got back to Aunt Linda's, I slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. She found me shaking in the kitchen. I handed her the will. She put on her reading glasses, her mouth tightening with every line. That lying bastard, she said in a low voice. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was closed. Linda sat me down and made me drink water. She kept rubbing my back like I was a little girl. Finally, I whispered, "What do I do?" She didn't even hesitate. "You fight him." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark thinking about Dad. He'd always said the farm was for both of us. For our kids someday. Daniel hadn't just stolen from me. He'd spit on our father's grave. The next morning I called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring. Sounded smug. "Little sister. Enjoy the funeral." I didn't even bother with pleasantries. I saw the will. Silence for a beat. Then he laughed. "Yeah." Mom realized who actually gave a damn about her. My hands shook around the phone. "You manipulated her. She was sick. She didn't know what she was doing." His voice turned nasty. "Watch it. Don't accuse me of shit you can't prove. I'll contest it." He laughed again. "You'll lose. You think anyone around here is gonna take your side? You abandoned her. You ran off to play big city banker while she died." That hit me so hard I couldn't breathe for a second. "I called every day," I whispered. He snorted. "Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Contest it. Waste your money. You'll get nothing. Just like you deserve." He hung up on me. I sat there staring at my phone. I've never felt rage like that in my life. But it wasn't just rage. It was humiliation. He wanted me to beg. That night he went to the bar and bragged about it. Linda heard from a friend. He was buying shots, telling everyone he finally got rid of the deadweight. Me. I didn't even want his money. I wanted what was fair. What our parents intended. But Daniel wasn't interested in fair. He wanted to win. He wanted me crawling. And I realized he didn't just steal from me because he was greedy. He did it because he liked seeing me lose. I spent days in a fog, going to work at the bank, smiling at customers while my stomach was in knots. At night I lay awake listening to Aunt Linda snoring down the hall, wondering what Mom would say if she could see us. Did she really want this? Or was she too weak to stop him? One night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the will. I noticed the date. 6 months before she died. I remembered that time. She was on oxygen. In and out of the hospital. Barely lucid. It wasn't just suspicious. It was evil. That's when it clicked. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let him laugh about how he destroyed me. I was going to fight. And this time, I was going to make sure he never saw it coming. The thing about humiliation is that it sinks in slowly. At first, it burns. Then it just sits there in your chest like a stone. After I decided I was going to fight him, the first thing I did was tell Aunt Linda. She didn't even blink. She said, "Good. About damn time." But the lawyer wasn't so sure. I went back to see Chuck Miller. He shuffled his papers, gave me this grave look over the tops of his glasses. "Emily," he said, "I'm not going to lie to you. Contesting a will is hard. Especially with your mother's signature and a notary." I didn't say anything. Just waited. Finally, he sighed. "You'd need evidence she was incapacitated. Coerced. Something." I straightened in my chair. She was on morphine. Oxygen. She couldn't even finish sentences. He winced. "Do you have medical records?" I shook my head. He rubbed his forehead like he had a headache. "You'll need them. And even then, it's ugly. Family turning on family. The judge will hate it." I didn't care. I said, "Fine. I'll get the records." He agreed to help if I could bring anything solid. When I left his office, I felt a little hope. But that didn't last long. Because Daniel heard about it. Word gets around in a small town. He showed up at Aunt Linda's. Didn't even knock. Just barged in. I was at the kitchen table with a folder of notes and bills. He slammed his palm down on the table so hard it made me jump. "You think you're going to take me to court?" Linda came in from the hall. "Get out of my house." But he ignored her. He leaned over me, so close I could smell the beer on his breath. "You want to drag our family name through the mud? You want everyone knowing how you abandoned Mom? How you didn't give a shit while she died?" I couldn't speak. He was sneering. "You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing. I'm the one who was here. I'm the one who took care of her. You think anyone's going to take your side?" Linda grabbed his arm and tried to pull him back. He shoved her away. Not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to make her gasp. That's when I snapped. "Get the hell out." He pointed at me, finger shaking with rage. "You want war? You've got it." Then he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass cracked. Linda was breathing heavy. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry he turned out like this." I just hugged her. But inside I felt like I was dying. He made me doubt myself. He made me wonder if I really was the monster he said I was. That night, I got drunk for the first time in months. Sat on the porch with a bottle of cheap whiskey I found in Linda's cupboard. I cried so hard my eyes swelled shut. I thought about Mom. Did she really think I abandoned her? Did she really want me to have nothing? Or was Daniel right there, whispering in her ear while she was too sick to fight? I'll never know for sure. That's the part that kills me. But the next morning I woke up with a pounding headache and a clear decision. I was done feeling sorry for myself. If he wanted war, I'd give him a war. I'd find every medical record, every pharmacy receipt, every doctor's note that proved she wasn't of sound mind. I'd talk to the notary who signed it. I'd make the town see who he really was. And if it ruined our family name, so be it. Because Daniel had already ruined it the moment he spat on our father's wishes and turned our mother's last days into a transaction. I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't prepared for how ugly it would get. They don't tell you that when you talk about fighting for justice. They don't tell you it means digging through every raw, infected wound of your family. My first stop was the hospital records. I went to the clinic where Mom had been treated. Told them I needed copies of everything for probate court. They gave me a look of pity. I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours with my knee bouncing, listening to daytime TV and the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. When they finally handed over that stack of files, it felt like holding a stranger's life. I drove back to Aunt Linda's, put the files on the kitchen table, and just stared at them. Her decline was all there. The prescriptions for morphine. The notes about confusion and altered mental status. The oxygen tanks. Doctor's handwriting scrawled, "Patient disoriented. Recommend comfort measures only." I pressed my fingers to my mouth to keep from screaming. I remembered talking to her on the phone. How she couldn't finish a sentence without coughing. How she sounded like a ghost. That's when I knew. There was no way she changed that will of her own free will. She wasn't capable. I called Chuck Miller, the lawyer. When I told him what I found, he actually whistled. "That's good," he said. "That's very good." I didn't feel good. I felt like I was betraying her memory. Like I was proving she'd been too far gone to know what was happening. But I didn't have the luxury of mercy anymore. Daniel made sure of that. Next, I went looking for the notary who had signed the new will. It took some digging. Small town, but people don't like getting involved. Finally I found her, Janine Lopez. I showed up at her front porch with my heart in my throat. She opened the door with suspicion in her eyes. I explained who I was. At first she tried to brush me off. "I don't want to get involved." But I didn't leave. I just stood there on her porch and said, "Please." My mother was drugged. She didn't know what she was signing. Something flickered across her face. She invited me in. Her living room was cramped and smelled like old potpourri. We sat on her worn couch. She didn't look at me while she talked. I remember she was crying. Daniel was hovering. Kept saying, "Just sign it, Mom. Don't make this harder." My stomach turned. I asked, "Did you think she understood what she was doing?" She shook her head. She was out of it. But she kept asking if she had to. I shouldn't have notarized it. I felt like throwing up. But I stayed calm. "Would you testify to that?" She hesitated so long I thought she'd say no. But finally she nodded. I reached out and took her hand. "Thank you," I whispered. When I got back to Linda's, I collapsed on the couch. Linda sat beside me and ran her hand through my hair like I was 5 years old again. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. But I didn't feel proud. I felt hollow. Because the closer I got to the truth, the more I realized just how badly Daniel had violated our mother's last days. He didn't just steal money. He stole her dignity. And I wasn't sure I'd ever forgive myself for not being there to stop him. But there was no turning back. Chuck filed the motion to contest the will. We served Daniel the papers. He showed up at Linda's again, pounding on the door. I didn't answer. He screamed from the porch, "I'll destroy you. You hear me? You're dead to me." Linda called the sheriff. They made him leave. But I knew it wasn't over. I stood by the window watching his taillights fade down the dirt road. My hands were shaking. Because that was the moment it became real. This wasn't a family fight anymore. It was war. The courthouse in Circleville isn't grand. Just a squat brick building with bad lighting and worse coffee. But when I walked in that morning with Chuck by my side and a folder full of evidence pressed to my chest, I felt like I was stepping into a battlefield. Daniel was already there, wearing a cheap suit and a smirk like he was invincible. When he saw me, he leaned in close and muttered, "You're gonna lose, little sis. Hope you brought your tissues." I didn't respond. Just looked at him. And for the first time, he looked small. Not like the older brother who towered over me. Not the boy Mom always defended. Just a bitter, aging man who thought control was love. We didn't go to trial that day. It was a motion hearing. But it was the start. Chuck laid out the basics. The questionable timing of the will, the medical records, the notary testimony. Daniel's lawyer tried to dismiss it as grief-fueled paranoia. I didn't even flinch. Because I knew what we had. The judge approved our motion to proceed. I caught Daniel watching me as we walked out of the room. He didn't look so smug anymore. That week, things escalated fast. Daniel left voicemails. Nasty ones. "You lying bitch," he slurred in one. "You think you're better than me? You think anyone cares what you say?" I saved every one. Another message came in at 2:14 a.m. "I hope you burn. You hear me? I hope you burn for what you're doing." Chuck listened to them in his office, his jaw clenched. These might actually help us, he said. Shows aggression. Shows he feels cornered. That was the thing. Daniel wasn't used to being challenged. He was used to bullying people into submission. But I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was done being the quiet daughter, the distant sister, the girl who always stayed out of the way. Now, I wanted justice. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted him to suffer a little, too. Meanwhile, I was still working full-time at the bank. Balancing spreadsheets by day, building a legal case by night. Some days, I was so tired I forgot to eat. But every time I looked at that farmhouse in the distance, peeling paint, broken shutters, Dad's old fence falling apart, I felt that burn in my chest all over again. It was mine. Half of it, at least. And he stole it. Weeks passed. Chuck kept building the case. Janine, the notary, gave her formal statement. Said Mom cried through the entire signing. Said she felt deeply uncomfortable but didn't stop it because Daniel kept pressuring them both. We got another affidavit from one of Mom's nurses. She remembered Daniel bringing in papers for her to sign when she could barely stay awake. It was all coming together. Then came the settlement offer. Daniel's lawyer called Chuck. Said Daniel was open to negotiation. Translation: he was scared. He wanted to avoid a full trial. The offer: a one-time payout of $20,000. I laughed when I heard it. You can tell him, I said, he can keep his blood money. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about everything he took and thought I was too weak to reclaim. Chuck nodded. All right then. We move forward. The trial date was set for 3 weeks later. Daniel started showing up at the bank. Not inside, just parked across the street in his truck, staring at the windows. Like he was trying to intimidate me. Linda wanted to call the sheriff. I told her not to. Let him watch. Let him see me showing up every day. Let him realize I wasn't going away. One night I came home to find a dead rabbit on Linda's porch. No note. But I knew. I knew exactly who did it. I stood there in the dark holding that broken little body, and something inside me hardened. Daniel thought this was a game. He still thought he could scare me off. But all he'd done was prove he deserved what was coming. And I was going to make sure he got it. The weeks leading up to trial were some of the longest of my life. During the day, I pretended to be normal. I'd help customers with their mortgage applications, hand out lollipops to kids at the teller window. Smile, nod, stamp papers. At night, I was a different person. I sat at Aunt Linda's kitchen table, the whole surface buried under folders and yellow legal pads. Chuck would call at 9 p.m. to go over testimony strategy. Linda would make me tea. Sometimes she'd sit there quietly while I read depositions out loud, trying to memorize every fact. I think she knew I wasn't just building a case. I was trying to hold myself together. Because there were moments, when I was too tired to think, when the voices in my head got too loud, when I'd hear Daniel's words over and over. You abandoned her. You don't deserve a dime. And I'd wonder if he was right. I'd wonder if maybe I really had been a bad daughter. If Mom had been disappointed in me in the end. But then I'd see that will again. The date on it. Her shaking signature. I'd remember her voice on the phone, rasping so hard she couldn't breathe, saying she didn't want me to see her like that. She wasn't choosing Daniel. She was trying to spare me. And he twisted that into his opportunity. That thought burned away my guilt every time. I used it like fuel. I didn't tell Chuck about the dead rabbit. Didn't tell Linda how I'd had nightmares of finding her hurt on the porch. I just got up earlier, stayed up later. We subpoenaed Mom's doctors. One wrote a statement saying she had progressive cognitive decline in the months before she died, worsened by morphine. The notary Janine went on the record about feeling pressured, about Mom crying and asking if she really had to sign it. Chuck even brought up the voicemails. He had them transcribed. Hearing Daniel's slurred threats in court-ready print made something in me unclench. It wasn't just me. Everyone could see who he really was. When Daniel got wind of the witnesses we were calling, he lost it. He called me at work. One of the tellers handed me the phone, looking spooked. I picked up. He didn't even say hello. You're going to destroy this family over some land? Over some money? I took a breath. It's not about money, Daniel. He laughed. It's always about money. You stole what was supposed to be mine. What was supposed to be both of ours. It's mine, he snarled. I was there. I took care of her. You don't get to show up now and act holy. I wanted to scream at him, but instead I whispered, "See you in court." And I hung up. The day before trial, I sat on the porch with Aunt Linda. She looked out at the fields turning gold in the sunset. "Your daddy planted half of that himself," she said. I didn't answer. She turned to me. "Win or lose, you know he'd be proud of you, right?" I felt something hot sting my eyes. "I don't know," I said. "I wasn't here. I wasn't there for Mom." Linda put her arm around me. "Emily, you did what you could. You weren't the one who used her." I cried into her shoulder like I was a kid. But when I pulled back, I felt lighter. Resolved. I was ready. I went to bed early that night. Laid there in the dark listening to the crickets. And for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel afraid of what would happen next. I just felt ready. Because tomorrow, for the first time in my life, Daniel wasn't going to get his way. Tomorrow, I was going to make him answer for everything. I woke up before dawn the morning of the trial. Didn't need an alarm. My heart was pounding too loud for sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slow, staring at the patchy rug in Aunt Linda's spare room. Today was the day. Linda made coffee strong enough to strip paint. She wouldn't stop fussing with my hair, telling me to sit still so she could pin it back neatly. "You're going to look him in the eye," she said. "And you're going to tell the truth. That's all you need to do." My hands were shaking when I picked up my folder of evidence. But I didn't back down. I walked into that courthouse with my chin high. Chuck was waiting outside the courtroom doors. He looked me over and gave me a nod. "You ready?" I swallowed. "Yeah." He smiled. "Good. Because we're going to win this." Inside, Daniel was already there. Slouched at his table, arms crossed, glowering at me like a kid denied dessert. I ignored him. Didn't even glance his way when I sat down. The judge was a wiry old man who'd known our family for decades. He looked sad when he opened the hearing. "Let's see if we can do this with some dignity," he said. But there was no dignity in what came next. Chuck was relentless. He walked the judge through Mom's medical records. Highlighted the morphine doses. The notes about confusion, disorientation. He called Janine, the notary. She sat there trembling but told the truth. She admitted Daniel pressured Mom. That she felt Mom didn't know what she was signing. Daniel's lawyer tried to shred her credibility, but Janine didn't budge. "I should have refused," she said, voice cracking. "I wish I had." I wanted to stand up and hug her. Next was the nurse. She read from her notes, voice clinical but pitying. Patient was non-verbal at times. Confused. Comfort care only recommended. Daniel wouldn't even look at her. Then came the voicemails. Chuck played them. The entire room filled with Daniel's voice. "I'll destroy you. Hope you burn. You're nothing." His lawyer turned red. Daniel sat there with his face twisted in rage, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Chuck rested our case with calm finality. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue coercion wasn't proven. Said families fight, that it didn't mean fraud. But the judge wasn't buying it. He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "I've known this family a long time," he said. "And I know what Frank wanted for that farm. My father." I felt tears sting my eyes. He looked at Daniel. You took advantage of a dying woman. Daniel actually jumped to his feet. Lies! He shouted. His lawyer tried to make him sit down, but he wouldn't. He was red in the face, sweating, yelling that I was a thief, that Mom wanted him to have it. The judge banged his gavel. Sit down, Mr. Cooper. Daniel sat, panting like an animal. The judge turned to me. Miss Cooper, you have my sympathy. Your mother was not of sound mind when she signed that document. The will is invalid. The estate will revert to the previous version, splitting equally between you and your brother. I felt the breath leave my body in a rush. Chuck put his hand on my shoulder. Daniel screamed. You can't do this. She was mine to take care of. She didn't want her. But the judge ignored him. It was over. He banged the gavel one last time. I didn't move. Couldn't move. I sat there while Daniel ranted, while the bailiff moved in to calm him down, while the courtroom emptied around us. Because I wasn't sure how to feel. I'd won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like tearing off a scab to show the rot underneath. Linda was waiting outside the courthouse. She threw her arms around me. You did it, baby. You did it. I didn't answer. I just cried into her shoulder. Because I knew this wasn't the end. Not really. I still had to face Daniel. Still had to go back to that house. And there was one last thing I had to do. A week after the ruling, I went back to the farmhouse. I hadn't set foot inside since Mom's funeral. It was mine now. Half mine, technically. But Daniel was gone. He didn't show up to sign the transfer papers. Didn't answer his lawyer's calls. Chuck said he'd given up. I didn't believe that. I knew my brother. He didn't give up. He just sulked away to lick his wounds. But the law was the law now. So I drove out there one cold afternoon with Linda riding shotgun. We didn't talk much. The sky was the color of old newspaper. When I parked by the porch, I just sat there for a minute gripping the steering wheel. The paint was peeling even worse than before. One shutter hung at an angle like a broken arm. Linda put her hand on mine. You ready? I nodded. But the truth was, I wasn't sure. Inside, it smelled like mold and stale beer. Empty bottles everywhere. Mud tracked across the floor. Daniel's old recliner sat in the middle of the living room like a throne. I kicked it over. It hit the floor with a dull thud, spilling coins and cigarette butts. I wanted to burn the whole place down. But I didn't. I went into the kitchen. Mom's old curtains were still up. Faded blue flowers. I touched them gently. They felt brittle in my fingers. Linda was behind me, quiet. I'm so sorry it ended up like this, she whispered. I shook my head. No. I'm glad I saw it. No more pretending. We spent the whole day there. Cleaning. Bagging trash. Linda found a framed photo of Mom and Dad in a drawer. It was cracked but intact. She handed it to me carefully. I pressed it to my chest so hard it hurt. I miss you, I whispered. We didn't talk about Daniel much. What was there to say? He didn't show up. Didn't try to stop us. But I knew he was out there somewhere, waiting for the next chance to blame me for everything. I'd be ready. Before we left that night, I stood on the porch and looked out at the fields. Brown and brittle with winter, but I remembered them green. Dad used to stand there at dusk with a beer in hand, telling me, "One day you'll bring your kids out here, Emmy. Show 'em what we built." It hurt so much I couldn't breathe. But I wouldn't let that dream die. I wasn't going to let Daniel kill it. A few days later, I sat in the bank's break room on my lunch, signing the last of the settlement documents. My name on the deed. Half mine. The other half his. But he couldn't touch it without me. Chuck was helping me set it up so he couldn't sell without my say. He tried calling once. Left one message. Hope you're happy. You ruined everything. I deleted it. I didn't need to hear it. I knew what he'd say. That I was the villain. That I destroyed the family. But the family was already broken long before this. He just hated that I stopped pretending it wasn't. Linda was with me at the county clerk's office when the last papers went through. She squeezed my hand. Your daddy would be proud. I cried. Not big, ugly sobs. Just quiet tears that felt like relief. Because it was over. Not fixed. But over. I'd protected what I could. I'd told the truth. And I'd made sure Daniel would never have everything he wanted. That was my revenge. Not ruining him, but making him live with the fact that I wouldn't go away. That he didn't win. Now the farm's in both our names forever. And I'll be damned before I let it go. I don't know what happens next. But I know one thing. I'm not afraid of him anymore. And that, more than anything, feels like freedom. In the end, I didn't destroy him. I didn't need to. I just made sure he could never take everything from me. I protected what was mine. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to stand up and fight back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more real-life tales of karma and revenge.